ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
In the 1980s, the Melbourne Football Club came up with a plan to inject new blood and energy into the AFL. It was called the Irish Experiment. They scoured Ireland's Gaelic football clubs for promising young sportsmen and then brought them over to the other side of the world to try their hand and their feet at the AFL. Because it turns out these two homegrown football codes are remarkably similar. This informal project grew and grew, and it's still going strong to this day. One of these Irish recruits is former Carlton and Geelong player Zach Tuohy. At the tender age of 17, Zach was scouted by the AFL. He'd always wanted to be a professional sportsman, which wasn't a possibility in the amateur Gaelic Football League where he was playing. So he jumped at this opportunity, packed his bags, kissed his mammy goodbye at Dublin Airport and started the great adventure of his life. 288 games later, gaining an Australian wife and 2 sons along the way, Zach is still living his version of the Irish Australian dream. He's written a memoir with Catherine Murphy called The Irish Experiment. Hi, Zach.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
I want to start with your grandma back in Ireland. How did you know that you were her favourite, Zach?
Yeah, there was a few signs. The most clear-cut example was my sister bought my grandmother one of those picture frames that has like multiple frames in one, so you could put lots of small pictures in this one kind of frame, and there was enough individual frames to put one of each grandchild, a picture of each of her grandchildren, because there was a few of us. And we left and came back a few days later, and she'd taken out all the photos of all the other grandkids, and there was just like a shrine to me. So it was like 12 photos of me in this one picture frame. So I'm not much of a detective, but even I was beginning to sense that I might be the favourite. It's a well-known fact in our extended family, and they've all come to terms with it.
She even had candles and stuff lit up for you around this, which I thought was more a thing after someone died, Zach, to have this kind of tribute.
If you didn't know better and you stumbled into her house and saw this shrine, your first reaction would be, "Oh my God, I wonder what happened." And like nothing happened. She just doesn't like her other grandkids as much as she likes me. So yeah, it was. I was very well looked after, and we were very, very close. What do
you put it down to? Like,
I guess she's just a great judge of character. I don't know.
Is that what you tell your cousins and your siblings?
I'm not sure. It was very much a two-way sort of relationship, because we were extremely close. I was up there just about every day. I maybe would have been up there 5-6 times a week, more or less my entire childhood. Yeah, my diet wasn't exactly immaculate back in the day. So there was a drawer, I remember vividly. There's a chip, like a potato chip back in Ireland called Hot Lips. And there's a drawer packed to the brim with them. And that was that made up the bulk of my diet when I was with Granny. And the other one was I would go into her bedroom. She had the bed and the TV in her room, and I would lounge in there, and she'd bring me in like rice bubbles, but with warm milk, hot milk. Oh. And that was kind of just my sanctuary. Like that was where I would go up after school, and I just kind of camp in there. Like it was my own little retreat and getaway. She used to give out to my parents for letting me play football because it would occasionally rain in Ireland. So I could be winning the biggest game ever, and she would still be seething at my parents for allowing me out into the rain. So she was overly protective in the best way possible. Yeah, we just had this tight bond that kind of persisted right throughout my entire life up until her passing. I have, which I still have hanging in my car outside this studio, it's a pocket watch. I think it was from Lourdes. It was kind of a blessed pocket watch she gave to me when I first came out, and that's still hanging in my car now. She gave me that the best part of 15 years ago. So yeah, we were both quite smitten by each other.
And what about your own house when you were cast back into the cruel world of your own family home? Who lived at home with you?
Yeah, I was. I just didn't have any kind of family angst. Like I always think I'd be a terrible musician because there's no like drama that I can draw on to make beautiful art. But yeah, I was the youngest of 4, 2 sisters and 1 brother. So it was 2 boys, 2 girls. And again, I was kind of the spoiled one. I kind of got away with a lot. I had the most incredible upbringing. It was, it was amazing.
And what part of Ireland was this in, Zach?
Midlands, so a place called Portlaoise, which it's funny to watch people try and pronounce it if they've never heard it before, because it isn't spelled how it sounds, but smack bang in the middle of Ireland. If you look at Ireland on a map and put your finger roughly right in the middle, you'd be pretty close to it.
Who are the two biggest employers in Portlaoise?
Yeah, so Portlaoise is famous or infamous, depending on your perspective, for the prison, which is more than 100 years old. It's been a stable employer right throughout my entire life of locals, and then the Midlands Hospital. It was a regional hospital, again, one of the biggest in the area for the longest time, and my father worked in the prison. It's a maximum security prison. It's where a lot of the heavy hitters would end up, so the people involved in the troubles, as they're called in Ireland, they would end up in the prison in Portlaoise, where my old boy worked for 30 years. So he enjoyed it, but it was a way he could stably provide for the family in the long term. And like I said, I think a lot of people in the town kind of ended up drawn towards the prison, and he loved it. To me, he might as well have been a postman. I just didn't see anything dangerous or exceptional about it, because it's all I've ever known him to do. He was doing it long before I was born, and he did it right up until I was actually in Australia before he retired. So it's only on reflection or talking to my mother that I realised could get quite dicey in there.
Were there ever risks for him outside of work? You know, that maximum security prison, a whole lot of people connected with the IRA, another part of the troubles?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, that was always a concern. And so my father has a wicked sense of humour. So one of the stories that I heard was there was a fairly thinly veiled threat towards the prison officers in the prison that they should check their cars before they come to work, bearing in mind the MO of the people in the prison is car bombings is a pretty standard practice. And whether or not the threat carried any weight, it was made, and I was talking to my mother about it, and I was like, it's wild. I was just kind of going to school not knowing any of this was happening. But if you ask my father about it, he said he was never too concerned, because he just used to get Mammy to go out and turn the car on in the morning. So that was his way of mitigating the risk. So I think it's like you kind of hold back the darkness for humour. But yeah, he said he was never concerned because he'd just get Mammy to turn the car on.
How did he look heading off to work, Zach?
It was kind of like his superhero uniform. It's just how I picture him in my mind's eye when I think about Daddy growing up. It was this pale blue shirt and dark pants, and he had the baton as well. He had the trench whistle, those old silver trench whistles, and they were toys to me. Genuinely, I would stride around the house with the baton and his prison officer hat on, and to me it was just like this fun little thing, and never really thought about why he might need a baton going to work. And always came home happy. He was always home in time for bed. For the most part, he would work nights, but never missed a game, would drive hours to watch me play both my parents.
Did he talk much about what interactions with those prisoners were like? What kind of approach would he take as a prison guard?
He never had any run-ins, and he made a point to treat the prisoners with respect, because the way he looked at it was his work conditions were their life conditions, and the state had already punished them, and it wasn't his job to add any dread to their day-to-day. So he actually found himself very often talking with the people in there. He would later in his life or post-prison career go on to get into politics, and obviously a lot of the reason some of the people are in that prison is it's political activism. So he would find himself debating regularly kind of the prisoners in there, and that's kind of how he treated them. And as a result, he never had any trouble himself in there, because that was just kind of his philosophy. It wasn't his job to punish them.
How close was your family house to the prison?
Once upon a time, we were right next to it, so couple of hundred metres next to it. It was close enough that there was an alarm or siren in the prison that would sound if help was required, because a lot of the prison officers actually lived right next to the prison, and the siren would go off, and that was it. That was a call to work, and a bit like a fireman hearing the alarm and sliding straight down the pole. If this alarm went off, you were out the door and straight into prison. So it was probably tough on my mother, I would think.
One morning that alarm went off at breakfast, but then your dad didn't come home at the usual time. Your mum must have been getting worried. Who knocked on the door that evening?
Yeah. This was this is one of my favourite stories. So the alarm goes off in the morning, and the prison officers, who lived in that little area, all kind of storm into the prison, and the hours roll by, and there's no contact, and you could, like my mother said, you could try and call the prison, but they wouldn't tell you anything. I guess security reasons or whatever, and lunchtime passes and Daddy's still not home, and there's a knock on the door, and it's one of the neighbours whose husband is also working in the prison, and she's brandishing a couple of bottles of liquor, and she's extremely concerned, and she says, "Has your husband come home?" And Mammy's like, "No, he hasn't." And she's like, "Come on in." So they go inside and they're stressed, and they end up having a drink, I guess, to calm their nerves. And then later that evening, there's a knock on the door, and it's my old boy and a couple of his prison officer friends. And it turns out that the call was just to search a cell. It wasn't a big deal. But afterwards, they thought it might be a good idea to head to a pub that one of the other prison officers owned. Didn't tell them. Why would they tell their wives that's where they were going? And Daddy comes back in that evening giving her tasting notes on how good the pints of Guinness were, and I think she got over it pretty quick, but this is just how things were kind of done at the time. And one of Daddy's friends was also aware that his own wife might not be too happy that he disappeared to the pub, so they brought him in, gave him a feed to try and sober him up before they sent him back for a fresh battle. And with newfound courage, he strode back into town and went back to the pub. So this is the kind of anecdote you end up. These are the ones I think my parents were choosing to tell me to maybe hide the nastier ones. But yeah, that would occasionally happen.
What are your earliest memories of playing sport as a kid, Zach?
I just loved it from the get-go. I was always carrying a football around. I was just infatuated and obsessed, and played hurling and football at a very young age. So I guess 5 or 6. Played hurling, football and soccer. Those were kind of my sports of choice, and I was just kind of nurtured by, I guess, the volunteers at the GA. As we've said, it's fully amateur. So
and
the only
GA
reason
is Gaelic football, yeah.
Gaelic football, yeah. So a GA, I guess, encompasses both hurling and football. Is under the banner of GA. I played both and then focused solely on football, which, as it turns out, was a pretty good decision because it led me here. But yeah, soccer, hurling and football at a very young age in Portlaoise.
For some kids, they're confident off the playing field and on the playing field. But for others, it can be a real way to, step into another kind of side of themselves that they maybe don't have in social groups. Where do you fit in that spectrum?
I was a pretty timid and timorous kind of child, publicly. I think my parents would argue I was not timid at home. Bit of a disaster from what I can gather. But no, I was. I was deeply insecure about a lot of things. When you get to the age where girls start becoming an issue, that was just not a fun period for me, and that lack of confidence kind of bled into other areas of my life. But from a sporting point of view, my recollection of my underage career is that I was always quite good, but I never felt like I was like the best player coming through the system. And that did change when I got to sort of 15 or 16. I could sort of see myself for the first time in my life begin to go past my peers. And when I speak to people now, coaches I had at the time, they're adamant they could see it in me when I was a young lad, that I was going to be quite good. But I was deeply, deeply insecure in most areas of my life, especially when it came to sports and women.
Sport was another thing that your lovely dad encouraged you in. Why did he turn up at your classroom one morning?
This might be my favourite single memory of my old boy growing up, and there's lots to pick from. But in primary school, I got my first set of golf clubs, kind of those like kids full set golf clubs, and there was a knock on the classroom door, and I can see it crystal clear now. The door would open, and it was at an age when if it was your parent at the door, this was just thrilling. Like this was just so exciting. And it was that kind of 11 o'clock small lunch, we called it. And he took me out and took me golfing. It took a half day out of school. Well, like, this is what I say, education's overrated. But yeah, he did. He certainly prioritised my sporting endeavours, and I'm glad it worked out because the alternative would not have been great. But yeah, this was just his way of, I think it was probably more a bonding sort of opportunity. He knew how excited I was to, I do love my golf as well. But it's just one of a ton of memories of him just kind of doing something spontaneous because he knew I'd like it. And it's my favourite memory, I think, ever.
Of all the sports you played, Zach, you were most talented at Gaelic football, but it's an amateur-only league. You were never going to be able to make a living out of it. When you were still at high school and unsure about what your future might hold, you picked up the phone one day and heard an Australian accent. Who was it?
Well, as it turns out, it was an Australian accent. Yeah, I didn't get it at first. So we
Someone's
lost.
pranking me. Who was this?
Yeah, we lost to a team called Derry in the Gaelic football under-18 semi-final, prelim final. And they're from Northern Ireland, and obviously they've quite a thick accent up in Northern Ireland, and I wasn't expecting a phone call from an Australian, so I answered the phone, my house phone, by the way, back when people used to call you on the house phone, and it happened to be me that answered, and it was an Australian accent from an Australian person, and his name was Jared Sholly, and he was a scout who's actually been responsible for bringing out quite a lot of Irish players. But my brain was going into overdrive trying to pick this accent, and I thought, well, it must be somebody from Derry looking to talk about the game. My little brain at the time couldn't comprehend an Aussie might be calling, and yeah, he asked me if I wanted to do a trial, a combine at a university in Ireland, and God, the excitement! Genuinely, it was like all your Christmases kind of coming at once. I couldn't believe it was potentially happening.
How much did you know about the game at that point, Zach?
I knew of the game. There was a player from Laois as well, who was actually at the time playing for the Brisbane Lions. His name was Colin Begley. So that was quite big news in our area because we are a small county. And he'd gone 2 or 3 years before, maybe 4 years before. So very much aware of it. And bear in mind, during that year playing Gaelic football, we knew there was Australian scouts watching the games. So word had kind of spread. So we were saying, like, it'd be amazing. You never think it's going to happen to you, but I'm like, God, could you imagine getting, like, the opportunity to go? So yeah, I was familiar with it. Hadn't really watched it. Wasn't like a big fan, but knew of it.
Did you try to give yourself a bit of a crash course in watching it before that trial?
Oh, Sarah, I spent hours and hours. Like, I became infatuated with the game, and because I knew it was Carlton who made the approach. There was a TV network, which is gone now, called Setanta, and they used to show an hour-long highlights reel of all the games that weekend, and me and my parents would settle in every Monday. It was the best, and just watch it, and then I would like Google stuff. Back then, if you went onto the AFL website, it would give you this like map of the oval, and on the oval it would have dots from where every goal was kicked, and you could kind of, get a little bit of a commentary on it. And I used to drag the cursor over the circles and tally up who kicked goals and where they kicked them from, and it was like, yeah, I became the biggest fan you could imagine.
Without
immediately
having yet played a game. So what happened when you turned up for this trial? What do you remember?
So this was in Limerick, which is kind of towards the west coast of Ireland, and we did the fitness work in the morning, and I was middling, quite good, not great, it's not a strength of mine. And then we did skills work in the afternoon, and it was torrential rain when we were doing the skills work. Now, bearing in mind, this is like 25 or 30 Irish players who've never kicked a Sharon before doing it in torrential rain. And this is where I, as somebody who was usually quite pessimistic on my own ability, was like, I clearly stood out, was in this skills component. I felt really comfortable with the ball.
Had you ever touched an AFL ball, the funny shaped AFL ball before? No.
Never. I feel really comfortable with the ball in my hands, and the kicking action never felt uncomfortable. And on reflection, I'm really adamant that how much I watched and how big a fan I became and visualised, and I really do think that helped. But that skills component in the afternoon, I think, is probably where I kind of pushed my name towards the top of the list. And yeah, eventually they kind of settled on a couple of players from that combine, and I was one of them.
So as just a teenager, you came to Australia for the first time for a 2-week trial with Carlton. How was your mum at the airport?
Yeah, that was not fun. This was really tough. So 17 when I first flew out, and I'd never travelled anywhere by myself. I was quite anxious about the flight, but we got to the airport and we got to the departure gates where you have to wait if you're not travelling, and yeah, they ushered me through, and Mammy was just no good. She was absolutely cactus. And even still, I'm in my mid-30s now, she will not come to the airport. So she did it once, and she said to my father afterwards, she was like, you can do that every time. I'm not doing that again. And even my old boy, who's quite stoic and tough, and he started losing it at the airport, and I was like, oh my God, this sucks. And he mentioned that the thing that got him was when I went through the departure gates, he could see me before the doors closed, looking left and right, trying to find out where to go. And for him, he was just like, what am I doing? So.
And what about you? As you say, this is your first big flight, your first solo flight. What did you expect Melbourne to be like?
So my only exposure to professional sport was I love the Premier League. Like, I'm a big Liverpool fan. I grew up watching soccer, and that, in my mind's eye, that's what professional sport was, is these like glamorous, shiny facilities. And I got to Carlton. I was so excited. This is going to be amazing. It's going to be like the Starship Enterprise when I walk in. It's just going to be. And it was this like, in Carlton's defence, they were in the process of renovating, okay? So I just flagged that. But where they were, it was like the Batcave with none of the accessories. It was underground, it was dingy, under the stands, tiny rooms. And I was like, okay, this is not what I was picturing. And it was a really tough couple of weeks for me. I hated the first couple of weeks. It was kind of in the middle of the season. I was kind of just ushered into the training facility and just sort of meandered about a lot. And again, I'm quite timid. This was very awkward. And it kind of wasn't what I'd built up in my mind. And I was like, oh, this sucks. Like, I don't know I can't believe this isn't what I was hoping it would be. But obviously it didn't deter me. And I did come back, thankfully.
You did come back for another trial and then made the move with your granny's pocket watch in hand. Yep. What do you remember about kicking your first goal, Zach?
Oh, my first goal was, I can remember it super vividly. It was in my second game. It was late against the Brisbane Lions. We were 10 goals up, and I got this kick switched from wide into me, and so nobody stood on the mark, and I was about 55 out, and I just had it like a bit of a pot shot, and it carried through. And when you're winning by that much, this genuinely what I remember thinking was like, I can't sprint around and fist pump because we're 6 million points up, so that wouldn't be kind of fair to the opposition. And I just remember walking away with my finger in the air, and I wasn't expecting the reaction I got from my teammates. And I know this happens for every first goal now. I know this now. This is actually something Australians do better than anybody in the world, is this mateship, camaraderie. Like, it's just unbelievable. But the entire team just started dogpiling on me, and I felt so good. Like, I'm getting goosebumps now describing it again. It was just such a highlight of my career, and yeah, it was amazing.
What about life off the field, Zach? Was there any time for romance in your new home?
Your romance, yeah, this is my other area of expertise. I was just batting women away. I couldn't move for all the women throwing themselves at me. No,
Isn't that supposed to be one of the perks of being a professional sportsman? Is that what happens when you're in the AFL?
Yeah, I must have had it written into my contract that it wasn't a perk I get. I can give you the hot tip. No, so I became very close with Levi Casbolt, a player I was drafted with, still one of my best mates to this day. Groomsmen at each other's weddings since. But we lived together. He started seeing a girl, Hayley, and through Hayley, they introduced me to Beck, my now wife. She's a very lucky woman. What can I say?
As your grandma would say. Back when you got together with Beck, the relationship got turbocharged when you were 23. What did Beck tell you?
Yeah, so I went to training one day. Beck had been over the night before, and she was going to work as far as I knew. And I came back, and she was still kind of in her tracky sweats, and she didn't look like she'd been to work, and she was really upset. And yeah, she said she didn't feel great. She did a pregnancy test, I think, which actually said, she wasn't pregnant, but she went to the hospital, and as it turns out, she was. And she was pretty upset, as you can imagine. This is a big deal for anybody, certainly a young couple, I guess, or early in their relationship. And I remember being thrilled. Like,
really?
Yeah. Genuinely, like, this was cool and exciting. And I wasn't naive to the fact it was going to be hard, but my sister fell pregnant at a pretty young age. And I was too young to appreciate it. I would have only been 10 or 11. But to me, like, I just saw how good that turned out. And Ava, her daughter, my niece, like, you just couldn't imagine the world without Ava in it. And I knew this would be the same. And I knew someday we'd get to a point, which is what I said to her. I said, this will be the best thing that's ever happened to us. It doesn't feel like it right now, but this cannot be a bad thing. And it wasn't, obviously, it was one of the best things that ever happened to us, despite some challenges I had in early parenthood. It was amazing.
Tell me about the day that your first son, Flynn, was born. What do you remember about seeing him for the first time?
Yeah, so funnily enough, so it's obviously it's a huge moment for anyone, and it's staying the obvious, but it's so physically taxing for the mother. And I was in the room, and Flynn was born, and you hear him cry, and I lost it. I started blubbering, and Beck, after going through hours of this, is just lying there going, "Oh my God!" She was, I won't say fine, but she was taking it a hell of a lot better than I was. So I'm a blubbering mess on the side here, and wondering why no one's catering to me and my needs. But no, it was incredible, and we didn't find out if we were having a boy or a girl, and I just convinced myself it was going to be a girl because Beck was craving dark chocolate and the moon was full, and you read all these stupid little so I just had it in my head that it was going to be a girl, and obviously Flynn was a boy, and I just lost it, and then I called my parents and I said it's a boy, and as soon as I said it, I almost held the phone away from me because I was gone again, and I had to hold the phone away so they couldn't hear. And then my old boy said something to me. He said, "Maybe now you'll know why I call you so much." And well, if you thought I was crying before, this was like a whole other level. And it's a bit cheesy to say maybe you don't know until you have a kid, but you don't. It's just not the same, and you feel different. And especially in the early part of my career, I'm worrying about trying to get a game, and this becomes all encompassing, this whole journey I'm on over here. But when he said that, I was like, do you know what? I get it. If one of my two boys left, I'd be desperate almost daily to know what's going on. So never once that I could answer a phone call or reply to a text. No matter what I'm doing, I'll answer.
And then there's that completely wild moment, Zach, where they just let you walk out of the hospital with this new human and you're just in charge. How did that feel for you and Beck?
I still think this is mental. You can't adopt a kitten without filling out more paperwork than... So, you have this kid and you're emotional, and, Beck's obviously tired and trying to recover, and they show you how to swaddle the baby, and then they just hand the baby to you.
Bye-bye.
Are you guys sure I don't need to do a course or something? This doesn't feel right. I have no qualifications
really
here.
Don't feel up to this.
Yeah. And then you go home, and it was really nice at first because it's new and it's exciting, but then the reality very quickly hits you that it's not all... unicorns and rainbows. And I actually had a community camp with Carlton at the time, which is every club does these, where you might go to, I forget where we went, maybe it was might go to Ballarat, or I play with Geelong now, they head down to Warrnambool. So you go a few hours away and you do community work. And about a week or two later, very soon after Flynn was born, we went and did ours, and I left Beck with the kid at home, just thinking, well, not knowing what I'm doing, I have to go to work, I guess. And I got a phone call. She was really struggling at home, and I just went to him and I said, I have to go. I can't stay. And it was a regular feeling, at least for me, that feeling of being entirely overwhelmed. Bearing in mind all this time, Beck is she is doing everything. I'm not pretending that I'm the one was getting up and doing all the feeds, and I was she would have had every right to be far more, struggling far more than I was. Because she facilitated my playing career, because I guess that was still important. I needed to be able to play well and provide and do all those things. But I don't know how she did it, because I was nowhere.
Having a baby wasn't something that you or Beck had been planning for this stage of your relationship. And I guess it tied you to this new country in a much more permanent way than football. Was that something you had to contend with too?
Yeah, I actually think I certainly felt a bit of guilt for feeling that way at a certain point, because we were early into our relationship, but now this relationship had to work, because the prospect of it not working, I knew I would never leave. Even if our relationship didn't work, I just would never leave the country and not be a regular feature in my son's life. That was now off the table, and that did, I think it generated a fair bit of anxiety within me, and guilt as well, because that's probably not the mindset you should have in a relationship, worrying about what if it doesn't work. But it was really, really tough, and it was really, really tough for Beck as well. I've no doubt. And I not super proud of some of the way I handled being a parent in the first year.
And for you, Zach, when you look back, what was it that was toughest for you? What was it that you were struggling with in terms of being a new dad?
Yeah, it was a few things. So I'm the youngest of four, as I said, and my sisters have kids, but everyone in my family is still back home in my small town. So even now, when I go home, I can drive to my sister's house. I'll creep the front door open and I'll just kind of nudge my kids in, and I'll text her on the way out going, by the way, my kids are in your house. That ability to just have that support network around and not have to feel well, if this goes tits up, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I really struggled with that. I really, really struggled. And I also, the time difference, this is a strange one. So daytime is nighttime back home. Daytime here is nighttime back home. And when I was really struggling, I never felt like I could just call. Now, obviously I could just call. I have an amazing family, as I said, but I never felt like I could just call at times that made sense. And, yeah, I'm not a talker. I'm now, but I'm not the type that would ever seek help. And the truth is, I don't even know if I'd do it now. I'd be more likely to do it now, but it's just not. There's something in my makeup that doesn't lend itself to making those types of phone calls. And so I kind of did it alone. My wife, she was my wife at the time, but she had no idea. Really?
So you weren't confiding in Beck about how hard you were finding it all?
No. So my MO is that I go very quiet and I give very much one-word answers. I won't make eye contact. I just recede into myself. And I knew I was kind of doing this at the time, but I couldn't help it. It's just where I was at. And I think she probably suspected at the time that I was really struggling, but so was she. And it came to a front. We played St Kilda that year he was born, and it was on a Monday night, which was unusual, which is why I remember it. And I was as low as a snake's belly at this stage, really struggling. And I was in my Carlton gear, had my kit bag next to me, I was ready to leave, and just as I was about to go, or not long before I left, just in the living room, just lost it. I don't know if she's seen me cry very often, probably not, that might be it. Just went, and nothing had happened, it was probably a good little period, just lost it. And that was probably the first time she saw it like that. And then I still went and played. And I knew I could call. I had a good relationship with the coach, Mick Malthouse, who's quite a polarising coach, but I had a great relationship with him. And I would have had no issue saying, I wouldn't have told him why, but if I really felt I couldn't have played, I would have no issue saying, I'm sick or something. But again, that's just not, I can't do that. If I'm fit to play, I'll play, and that's it. So I went and played.
I guess also the drama, the difficult place was at home with the baby. Playing on a football field is probably where you felt capable and that you knew what you were doing, as opposed to life at home.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, that's almost more my comfort zone. It's an area of my life I had control of or expertise in, and it was everything else kind of outside. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, and yeah, I'm not good at dealing with those kinds of emotions like a lot of blokes, and I dealt with it in private.
So there was that time when, you lost it in front of Beck and she saw you crying. Were you crying alone as well, Zach, in that period, in those first months, that first year?
Yeah, I was. There was a spot when I would drive home when I would feel the need, which is not every day, but certainly wasn't never, to pull over and just try and get it out as quick as I could. And then you just bottle it up again and go about your business. But that would happen quite a bit. And again, it's so obvious saying it now that's this wasn't even a red flag to me really at the time. I guess it's obvious it's not a good thing, but I don't know. This was just so I said in the book, I have a way of operating that serves me really well as an athlete, but probably not great personally or off field. And it's just kind of shut up and get on with it. That is how I've operated from the get-go. So in terms of sporting wise, that means I can play through injuries. I've racked up a lot of games playing that I know other players wouldn't have played, because just get on with it. Yeah, okay, you're sore, but that's the name of the game. But that bleeds into your personal life where, okay, you're not feeling good, but just shut up, no one cares, just get on with it. This is what it's like. And I think I maybe thought this is just the way it is. This is just how you're going to have to get through it, and it is what it is, and there's no changing it. But yeah, I would park occasionally and try and get it out.
Looking back, Does it seem to you like it's likely you had depression or postpartum depression?
Yeah, well, that's been said to me a few times when describing it. And like, again, I haven't spoke to anyone about it. I don't want to say it is because I don't know what the sort of clinical criteria would be. But one thing that has struck me since the book coming out is the amount of blokes who I'll have come, and like friends of mine, not randoms on the street, people I know really well who said, oh, like this is, it's like I was reading my own experience. And again, I always want to caveat it with like, this would have had to have been harder for Beck than me, because not only was she dealing with the same stuff, she also had the physical recovery. And then like, I don't think I was a joy to be around. So you're putting all that in one. And I think maybe that's one thing why you maybe don't talk a lot, is because like we all know it's definitely tougher for the mum. So you don't want to be the one that's like, oh, like, you know, this is hard for me too, by the way. But the truth is there's a ton of blokes, and a lot in my circle, as it turns out, who felt exactly the same, which was weirdly comforting in a strange way.
How did things start getting better for you then? Was there a moment, or did it just shift over time?
It almost felt like overnight it got better. Obviously that's not what happened, but once you get through the first year, I don't remember really struggling in the same way again. And I still have kind of little ups and downs here and there, mood-wise. Yeah, I think my wife would say I'm still quite I think I'm a pretty emotional person. I just tend to bottle it up. So that hasn't changed. But once I got through the first year, it just felt kind of normal and everything was fine. And our eldest is a pretty poor sleeper. I do think that played a big part. We were both quite sleep deprived, and I think that's the hardest part of parenting. I think by and large, the day-to-day operations quite like fun for the most part. Obviously, not always. Like, it's challenging. But when you're also sleep deprived, it's just that's a nasty combination. So we kind of got through that phase, and yeah, things just smoothed out for me. Like, and it just got better, and it's been pretty good since.
In terms of your footy career, you went from Carlton to Geelong, where you had a shot at a premiership flag with the Cats. Tell me about your nerves in the lead up to the 2022 grand final.
Yeah, so it was by the time we made the grand final, we were so clearly the best team in the league. But that brings with it a kind of whole like different type of pressure going in. So we made the grand final in 2020 against Richmond. I think we might have finished higher than Richmond. I might be wrong about that. But I did feel going into that grand final that we had to play exceptionally well, and we maybe needed Richmond to not be at their best. Whereas in 2022, especially because we were playing Sydney, who were a really good young team, but I thought they'd actually arrived a bit early. I thought they would be good the following year or the year after. So they arrived a bit early, and we got them in the grand final. And I can remember thinking, if we don't beat this team, like, I will never get a better look in this, because I just thought the gulf between us and them was really significant. And I was more panicked by dropping this opportunity. So they beat Collingwood in the prelim. We'd beaten Collingwood 3 times already that year, but they'd run us very close, I think, on every occasion. And we just played them a couple of weeks before in the finals, and it was the hardest game of football I've ever played in my career. We just hung on, beat them by a couple of points, but it was like relentless from start to finish. And I can remember sitting on the couch watching Collingwood play Sydney in the prelim to see who was going to play us in the granny. And Sydney got out in front early, and then they just hung on, like barely hung on, and Sydney won. And I was sitting on the couch going, oh my God, we've got Sydney in the final, like, this is great, but I better not drop this one, like, because I'll never. Yeah. And the only time I ever spoke to a psych or a sports psych was that week. And it was just a conversation. It wasn't anything super deep. And I told him what I just said to you. I was like, mate, like, this has become an all-encompassing thing for me, winning a flag. It will entirely dictate my outlook on my career. And if we drop this game, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he gave some sage advice, as he always did. And I felt pretty good afterwards.
What did he say? Do you remember?
He said, well, it's in your control, and there's a reason you're the best team in the competition. And they would know that just as well as you know it. And it made me feel a bit better. And then in the entire build-up, just the day of the game, there was no nerves. It was like a perfect day. It was like a bloody video game. It was just like sun beaming, and yeah, the footy felt light in my hand, and it was just. And even before the margin blew out, it was actually, I don't think there was a goal for 10 or 12 minutes, and the margin obviously got really significant. But in that first 10 or 12 minutes, when nobody had scored, we were just all over them, and I was like, this is a good day. You can sort of sense it early.
And what was it like when the siren sounded and you were the winners?
I bloody cried again. Do you know what? I was only doing this book that I realised how often I cried. Like, supposed to
I'm
be
not
this
emotional. I'm an unemotional guy. And I sobbed. I was sobbing again.
In my head, I'm like a stoic Terminator. and then I was writing all these stories down going, bloody hell, I cried again. What's wrong with me? But we come so close so often over the previous 7 or 8 years. Like, we'd lost the grand final, lost a couple of prelim finals. And I was pretty sure, I didn't know if it would ever happen at this stage. And obviously, a long way from the final siren, we knew we'd won it because the margin was so significant and you got to soak it in and enjoy it. And of course, the siren goes, and I can remember exactly where I was at the time. And there's a little phenomenon in grand finals that happens when teams know they're going to win the grand final, which is the coaches come down to the boundary line and all the players are up and everyone's hugging, like just when there's 10, 15, 20 seconds left. And I can remember glancing over at the boundary line and I could see the coaches all down. I could see everyone hugging and I was like, oh my God, it's about to happen. Like, I've seen this on TV. This is cool. It's about to happen. And then siren goes, I'm straight on the ground like a blubbering mess. So.
How did you bring Ireland with you into that triumph, Zach?
Yeah, so in the 2020 Granny, when we made it, it was during lockdown. It was the COVID year. And I asked one of the staff if they could get me a green and white flag initially, because that's the colours of my hometown, Portlaoise. And they actually got me a Nigerian flag, which is the same colours. Now, interesting fact about me, Sarah, I don't know if you know this, but I'm not African. I know, shock, a big reveal. I'm not actually African. But it's the exact same flag. It's green and white, same everything. And I gave it to a really talented teammate of mine who's a talented artist. And I asked him if he could put Come On the Town on it, because that's our catch cry for Portlaoise. And I planned on bringing it up to get my medal. We didn't win that grand final. And then I stored it in my bedroom, tucked away, folded up. And I said, if we ever get back there, I'm bringing it. And we did. We got back there. I had it in my bag down in the rooms and asked one of the physios if they could run down before the stage was set up and grab it for me. And there's a photo of me walking off with the Come On the Town flag. That's the same flag from the Granny we lost a couple of years before, which is nice.
Your hometown must have gone crazy for that.
Oh, they went absolutely bunta. Yeah, it was it was great. And the reception I got when I got home was just incredible. My local Portlaoise GA, they put on countless functions for me, and it was just, it's one thing I'm really proud of. They've always been, I would hope that there's a few people connected with Portlaoise GA who wish I stayed. I would like to think they'd think, oh, he would have been a good player for us, but never once has that stopped them kind of celebrating my success like their own. So I've kind of felt compelled to make sure they know I haven't forgotten.
Zach, you'd had this absolutely amazing run, played a record number of games for an Irish player in the AFL. Was your body letting you know that maybe it had had enough by this point?
Yeah, my body was getting pretty bad. So I've had a persistent knee injury since 2018. And that just became maintenance as best I could. And in 2020, actually, it was really bad. So in 2020, I didn't know how much longer I'd have. So I was getting fluid drained out of my knee on a Friday. And then I would play the game on a Saturday. And then I wouldn't train all week, get the fluid drained down my knee. So it just kept pooling. And funnily enough, I've a great relationship with Chris Scott, the Geelong coach, and he's let me know since that after that 2020 season, I signed a 2-year contract extension, and the physios and doctors, I now know at the time, told the club they were mental to give me 2 years. He said there's no way his body's going to hold up for 2 more years. As it turns out, I played 4 more years, and Scotty, now we joke about how he's glad he told him to push off and sign him on. So he's somebody I've got a huge amount of affection for. But look, I could see in the last year or two that I wasn't doing stuff I had been doing before. And the biggest thing for me is that I didn't want to flicker out, is how I've always thought about it. I didn't want to just limp out of the game. And like I said previously, I'm a big soccer fan. I love the Premier League. And there was a pundit who's a former player who said something which is, it's quite harsh, but it resonated with me about another soccer player. He said you should leave the game before the game leaves you. And I was just worried about hanging around a year too long and just being a bit part player. And I think you sometimes run the risk of then resenting the game or resenting the club if you're not at the peak of your powers and you're not playing regularly. And I just didn't want that to happen. And So I think I just about got out in time because my body is to be honest, it's more bashed up than I realised. Now that I'm not doing the weekly maintenance, it's bloody sore to go for a run.
Your dad had been such a role model for you. How do you think about the similarities and differences between your two careers?
Yeah, well, I think I'm extraordinarily lucky. The way the cards have fallen for me in life is just almost unfair. Because, like I said, he enjoyed his work, but for him it was a means to an end. This is not something he was like passionate about. It was an extremely dangerous environment to work in, but he did it because it meant that he could provide for all of us, and we had a lovely house and we went on holidays every year. Like, we had everything, but we had it because he was going into a pretty dangerous place on a daily basis. Whereas I get to do something that, even at its worst and at my lowest, it was still a pretty fun job to have. And I tried to towards the end of my career, when I got a little bit more philosophical about this stuff and I was thinking maybe more as a parent and more, deeply. Every time I would play a game over the last couple of years, especially at the MCG, when we would run out and do our warm-up an hour before the game or 45 minutes before the game, I would always take just 15 or 20 seconds and I'd do a full circle and I'd look at the stand all around me, because that was effectively my office. Like, it's a pretty fun workplace to have. So I tried to soak it in as best I could, and I actually did the same with my kids when I did finish my last game in Geelong. The club did a big send-off and it was really sort of touching, and the crowd stayed behind after the game, but my kids were out on the ground. And I said to my eldest, I asked him, like, just to look around. So, like, he stood with me and did the same spin I'd been doing. I said, can you just try and remember this? Like, I don't expect him to. He was 10 at the time. But I said, can you just try and just look at the crowd and, like, look at the shape of the stadium and, like, feel the noise and just try and remember it? Because, like, I've just loved my work from go to woe. Like, even the bad days are good days.
Leaving professional sport is such a massive adjustment. You know, the loss of this thing that you really love, but also all of the surrounding structure and support and routine and purpose. How's the transition going for you so far?
It's going good. I've done some stuff since retiring I never thought I'd do, including the book, and I went and ate a penis in the jungle, which was something I didn't. Which I didn't. That's always a joy, eating a penis in front of millions of people. But I've done stuff that I didn't think I'd get to do, and that fulfilled in me some kind of little competitive gap that was left behind. But the truth is, immediately after I retired, I didn't miss it, which I think was really telling. But I knew that would come. And every player will tell you, once games start back, it hits you pretty hard. And the games I don't miss as much when I watch, say, Geelong play. I've got lots of my friends still there. Are the games where they just wallop the team, where it's a 90-point win. That's fun. That's good to watch. I hate watching them lose, and I hate watching them win tight games, because the feeling after those games is just so strong. And again, including the losses, like, it's such a nice place to be after a loss. It's a weird thing to say.
What do you mean?
It's just, it binds you so tightly. Like, when I look back at my career now and I reflect on the premiership success, my mind will always first go back to the prelim the year before, when we got absolutely spanked. Because when you look at the photos now with me and Danger or Tom Stewart or Rhys Stanley, who are like some of my best friends, holding the cup, it's like I can remember being in the rooms the year before, like, completely distraught with them. And one of my favourite, like, I love a glass of red. We lost the grand final in 2020. Me and Rhys Stanley snuck away and just had a drink together that night, and we ended up having a great night. And I'm so fond of that night. I love the glass of wine we had. I love it now. It's one of my favourites because of those memories. So I'd rather not be involved in losses, and you don't enjoy them in the moment. But looking back, I'm like, a lot of my best memories and tightest bonds were forged over losses.
And those connections, they're not so easy to make in regular world. I mean, it sounds like they're of the sporting field or maybe in warfare. I don't know. Like, how do you replace that or live up to that now that you're a regular Joe?
Yeah, I don't think you do. So the concern for me, I knew leaving the game that it was very likely in about a year's time that's when I'd kind of hit this, like, metaphorical cliff a lot of players talk about, where, like, you lose a lot of meaning. Like, I've been a footballer since I was 5, and for the first time ever I'm not. So if I'm not a footballer, kind of what are you type of thing. So I knew that would come for me at some stage, and for me I'll attack that by introducing some level of competition back into my life. So I have loads of ambitions of doing all these different types of physical challenges, you know, whether it be marathon somewhere in Europe, or I'd love to do some big bike rides around Australia for charity. And I've got all this stuff in my mind's eye, but I'll have to replace it with something. But you talk about like those relationships are hard to build. They're pretty hard to build even in the sports world. So I'm heavily connected to a lot of people. But the reality is I played 15 years AFL, played probably with hundreds of players, as in teammates, not against. So there's probably hundreds of people at some point have been my teammate. I've maybe got 6, 7 blokes that I think I'll be friends with in 15 years. Like, they don't come around often, and you want to cling on to them when they do, because that's just the way the world is.
And I guess now you can be the dad who rocks up at your kid's school and knocks on the door saying, let's go and play a round of golf this afternoon.
Yeah, I've done stuff like that already. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Like, they'll come home from school and it's like, did you say, like my youngest, like brilliant, academically, like really good, doing great in school. He's a little angry fella. So he come home from school, I'm like, Rafferty, like, were you good today? Did you hit anyone? He goes, no. I'm like, okay, we're going to the toy shop. That's it. I'm going to buy you something. So it takes very little for me to be like, I'm going to get you something. Yeah.
Well, I think your granny would be very proud, even though I'm sure she'd love you to be back home. But it's really wonderful to meet you and hear some of your stories. Zach, thank you so much for being my guest on Conversations.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Podcast and broadcast. This is Conversations with Sarah Konoski.
Zach Tuohy was my guest on Conversations today, and Zach's memoir, written with the ABC's own excellent sports commentator, Catherine Murphy, is called The Irish Experiment. This conversation was recorded on the lands of the Yagara, Turrbal and Wurundjeri peoples and produced by Maggie Morris. Our executive producer is Nicola Harrison. I'm Sarah Konoski. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a podcast of Conversations with Sarah Konoski. For more Conversations interviews, head to the website abc.net.au/conversations.